It's a time of change here in Central Florida. The Magic are good again. That's fun. What they can learn from another team that took a step up last year. It's time to go Locked Off Magic. We're going to preview UCF football on today's Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked Off Magic today. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the senior writer over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. Today is August 14th, 2024. It will be August 15th, 2024 soon enough. Today, on today's episode of Locked On Magic, we're going to go Locked Off Magic. We're going to talk about UCF football, preview their upcoming season, the lessons they learned in their first year in the Big 12, and how they maintain their identity as they try to step up a level of play. We're going to get to that, relate some things back to the Magic coming up here in just a moment. But first, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. With the NBA season over, with the Olympics over, sports is getting a little dry. We're just waiting on NFL and college football to start. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Before we get into our conversation about UCF football with our friend Kyle Nash from Black and Gold Banneret, quick site announcement, quick podcast announcement. First things first, the NBA schedule is coming out August 15th. That is today at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll have a full episode tomorrow breaking down the Orlando Magic schedule. We'll dive into a little bit of schedule stuff, but I thought to myself, why stop there? It's a schedule. There's 80 games coming out tomorrow. I could go down the whole list. That wouldn't be very exciting. So instead of doing that, we will do that. But instead of doing that, we are going to do a live schedule release episode. Thursday, August 15th. That is today, August 15th at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Join us here on the Locked On Magic YouTube page for a live show. If you're listening on the podcast, you can join live at 6 p.m. on the YouTube page. The audio version of that will go up shortly after. I'll probably do some light editing or whatnot. I am currently not planning on doing a Twitter Spaces. On top of that, it'll just be live on the YouTube page, youtube.com/@LockedOnMagic. Again, that is today, August 15th at 6 p.m. We're obviously now kind of in the dregs of summer. There's not a lot of basketball going on. We get the schedule. That's gonna feed the fire for a little bit. But I'm an Orlando guy. I like working my way around the Orlando sports. I like finding parallels between the other teams here in Central Florida and what the Magic are going through. And I really think this is an important conversation to have, not only just because UCF is a big deal here in Central Florida. It is a big deal. They're a big team, and what they've done and how they've grown into a Big 12 team is one of the great stories in sports, and is really shown how much this city and this community has grown as a sports town. UCF, though, is doing a lot of what the Magic are trying to do in a certain way. Obviously, college football is not the same as the NBA. We'll get into some of those distinctions here in a minute, but what UCF did last year, jumping to the Big 12, jumping to a heavier weight class and going through some struggles is something that I see the Magic having to deal with too. And so I'm planning also to do a Locked Off on Orlando City, which similarly has had to figure out how to deal with expectations for the first time. We'll have plenty to say about that and the comparisons between the two teams there. But UCF obviously jumping into the Big 12 last year, they went 6-7. They won, I believe they were 4-5 or 3-6 in Big 12 play. It was a rude awakening to what a higher level of play is and how UCF has managed to adjust and how UCF will manage to adjust as they get ready for the upcoming season is going to be a fascinating storyline. So I wanted to bring in our friend Kyle Nash from Black and Gold Banneret to discuss how UCF is preparing for this critical season. I hope you will entertain me. I hope you will enjoy. We're going Locked Off Magic here in just a moment. And we are now officially locked off Magic. I am joined by Kyle Nash of Black and Gold Banneret and the Duval Dive. We're here to talk a little bit about our hometown team, the UCF Knights, a team that many of you probably pay attention to, but I think there's a lot of parallels between what UCF has experienced and what UCF is going to experience this year as compared to the Orlando Magic. We're all in the same boat here. So let's welcome in our good friend Kyle Nash. Kyle, how you doing today?
Honor, joy, and privilege to jump in, Phil. Listen, for all the stuff you showed me around the old hat that I am, I say arena. It's not even the same building anymore. But all the stuff you showed me around the Kia Center, and honor, joy, and privilege to pay back the privilege to jump on the show here, walk you through some things here. But listen, as basketball is my distant third language, I'm going to say this, okay? Steph Curry's shot over Wemby in the gold medal game was amazing, but can people stop saying GOAT point guard, okay? Magic Johnson still. Thank you very much. Thank you for attending my TED Talk here on Locked Off Magic. Okay.
Bob Cousy has words to say as well. But let's dive into this with UCF because they're obviously in this really exciting period for them. They joined the Big 12 last year, long journey to get from, frankly, an incredible star rise of a journey for the program. Yeah. Just still so relatively new compared to the blue bloods in college football. But to go from the American to the Big 12, they obviously had kind of this up and down season last year. They ended up still making a bowl game. They had that 5-game losing streak in the middle of the season. What was to you the biggest lesson for UCF last year in their first season in the Big 12?
Yeah, I see. So it's interesting you put it that way because, listen, I said it plenty, be it on the Black and Gold Banneret, as you mentioned, or the Night Shift podcast powered by the Black and Gold Banneret, that the quest would be, if 6 games to me was a successful season because if they made a bowl game. Now, granted, the bowl game was what it was because, once again, Gus Malzahn had to play with a less than healthy starter who didn't even finish the game, okay? But let's not focus too much on that.
Bowl games are weird right now with the transfer portal, all those rules. It's weird.
Hey, at least the whole damn team didn't boycott the game. Am I right, FSU fans? Anyway, with all that in mind, I think it's not so much lessons learned as in a die roll that failed, right? The linebacking core was not robust enough to tackle Power 5 running backs. That is the gist of their problem. Nitpickers will say, what about tight ends in the Big 12? Obviously a factor too. Let's not get crazy. But I'll put it this way. I think UCF fans will take a game losing to a tight end sneaking out and making a big play versus teams having upwards of 35 to even 40 minutes time of possession running the damn football. And that lesson, though, that die roll failed has been learned. If you look at some of the linebackers and safeties that UCF has brought in, on top of the fact that they already have a defensive tackle core that's absolutely fantastic. Right? Don't get me started on Ricky Barber, Lee Hunter, John Walker, Matt Alexander, all these guys. It's going to start with the middle and getting those linebackers in via transfer, right? What the fans are going to learn is that Gus Malzahn has been one of the top best recruiting coaches, not in the conference, Philip Rossman-Reich, in the nation. And for all the people talking about the Gus bus not driving fast enough, y'all fools got to understand the acceleration rate of this bus in question with recruiting history being made at the program each year of Gus's tenure. And the revamping this linebacker core is going to be part of that. Ethan Barr coming from the SEC, Deshaun Pace coming from Cincinnati, both huge deals for guys. And that's just a couple examples of the transfers they're bringing in to try to stop the run.
Yeah, and that was obviously such a huge deal. Full disclosure for those listening, I covered UCF last year for the Associated Press, just doing a lot of game recaps for them. So I watched all of their games last year. So I'm not coming here completely out of the cold. But to my eye, the big thing for UCF last year was, like you said, they couldn't stop the run. It wasn't even that they couldn't stop the run. It's that they got worse in the fourth quarter. And that was something they talked a lot about last year in reference to their time in the American, where they felt like they lost a lot of close games. They didn't finish games. You could see that develop in the Big 12 again. They were, except for the Kansas loss, they were in the game in the fourth quarter of every game that they played last year. The Kansas loss was the only one where it was done before halftime. And there's, you were just kind of out of it. To me, the biggest difference that I saw was that the offensive lines, especially, and the defensive lines too, could just overpower UCF in the long run over the course of the full 60-minute game. And so you get to the end of these games, and UCF would just be out of gas. Like, they might be in the right spot and they'd get blown up on a block or blown up at the point of attack. And it just goes to show that, you do have to play all four quarters, that all that wear and tear does matter. You mentioned that UCF put a lot of focus on adding personnel to add depth. I know that's a big thing that they've talked a lot about this offseason. What else does UCF need to do to kind of fix and correct these problems as they look ahead to this season?
And I'm glad you set the table for me beautifully here to make this point, Phil. Like, there's what you say when you look at some of the stuff surface level is kind of what you would expect, right? Oh, UCF got dominated at line of scrimmage and point of attack. The answer is not really. Not as bad, at least, as a lot of people would imply. And I'm even including guys that work for the college that call games. Not calling anyone in particular out, but his last name rhymes with Annuals. But they were saying that the offensive line was struggling. An offensive line doesn't struggle and get a 1,400-yard ground gainer.
They don't lead what, they were top 10 in the country in rushing yards last year. Yeah. Like, they can run the football at UCF.
I mean, I don't know if you were at the presser I had with Gus Malzahn during one of the fall camp pressers here, but I asked him if revamping and rebuilding the offensive line was his biggest concern, and he dunked on me subtly. I wasn't insulted, obviously, but he dunked on me, citing the past 2 years having a top 15 offense the past 2 seasons. And by the way, I think they were 8th last year. And the part we're not talking enough about, you ask what UCF can do. I think it's what UCF needs to have happen, Phil. They need to have a starting quarterback that stays bleeding healthy. And I don't mean starts, I mean stays healthy. No disrespect to John Rice Plumlee. I think he did a great job returning kicks in the preseason for the Steelers. However, staying healthy, not a strong suit here at UCF. And we all know the story about the sock hawker himself, Dylan Gabriel, being knocked out early in Gus's first year. That's right. I made a sock reference. My bad. But listen, here's where I think and I'm not going to call it a fallacy, but the illusion of the lines being an issue comes into play. The offensive line, we took care of that by telling you RJ Harvey was a 1,400-yard ground gainer. He may only have gained 1,000 yards with an actual bad offensive line. By the way, a lot of them returning for another year of experience, minimal turnover to the past 2 seasons. Herb Hand told me how confident he was in this group coming up and how little of a reset it actually is at UCF Media Day a couple weeks back. So that offensive line coach having that much confidence is a thing. I mentioned the defensive tackle core. They were doing their job. But if you got big dudes like that working for 34, 35, 40 minutes of game time, they're going to get tired. That's what caused that late game anomaly you're talking about. Meanwhile, you have an actual starting quarterback, or maybe a guy that could deliver a little bit of punishment like KJ Jefferson, that keeps the offense on the field. And I can't stress third down enough, Phil. If you have that and the defense isn't on the field for upwards of 30 minutes, then maybe suddenly your big guys are fresh to deliver a little bit more punishment to the other side, and things start to tilt. I know that time of possession isn't a sexy stat, and really, let's be honest, the only stat that really matters is the score. But if we're going to talk about stopping the run and balancing things, it starts with the offense staying on the field, and then the linebackers being able to tackle one-on-one. Listen, I get it. DJ Giddens was an amazing NFL style running back for Kansas State that punished them in the fourth quarter and changed the direction of the game. That was started by Timmy McClain, by the way, where they were winning at one point. I believe it was early third, late second quarter, okay? Everyone forgets that part. But keeping the offense on the field, I believe, is that second item you're looking for that UCF can do to make things right.
It's probably not a good thing that we took 9 minutes to talk about KJ Jefferson, because that's such a humongous addition to this offense. I want to get into a little bit more about that and how UCF maintains its identity as they step up to this new level of play that they discovered last year. We'll talk about that and tie that into the Magic a little bit. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. Let's take a quick break from our conversation to give you a quick word from our friends over at FanDuel. Look, we all love sports. This time of year is kind of rough for us sports fans. Yes, baseball is still going on, but college football and the NFL are still preparing for their seasons. There's no NBA. It can be a little bit of a rough time with so few games, and with the sports not sportsing like we want them to. FanDuel, though, is here to keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you are in the mood. FanDuel offers great futures, including on the Orlando Magic. They're over under 47.5 wins. But let's take a look at what FanDuel thinks they're going to see from UCF this year. How about that? UCF currently, let's see if I can find it. UCF is currently slated as one of the favorites, fourth favorite to win the Big 12 championship game at plus 800. They're tied with Oklahoma State, behind only Kansas State and Utah. The Knights will see Utah actually on Black Friday. So if you don't want to watch Magic Nets that night up in Brooklyn, no better place to spend Black Friday than at the Bounce House. UCF, obviously one of the best teams here. They're favored by 42.5 points in their opener against New Hampshire. I don't know if I would bet that, even though I think UCF's going to win that game pretty handily. Either way, FanDuel has you covered. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There is something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer today. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Before we get back into our conversation, though, make sure to make your second listen the Locked On NBA podcast. There's no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are here once again with Kyle Nash of the Black and Gold Banneret, talking about UCF football today to get you ready for the start of the season. That's coming up August 28th, roughly, as we're 29th. Thank you. I don't want to show up a day early. But roughly 2 weeks from today, as we're recording this, this will go up roughly 2 weeks before opening kickoff there for the Knights. We left off talking about the consistency at quarterback. And obviously that's such a crucial piece to this puzzle. And look, John Rice Plumlee was a good quarterback at UCF. Like you said, when he was healthy, he was a game-changing player. He could run the ball. He could throw the ball. He could do all the things that UCF needed him to do. KJ Jefferson's different, not just because he is 6'4", 6'5", 250, like he's a big dude. Gator, any of my Gator fans listening or trying to get a little bit of a scouting report on UCF, since there is no Locked On Knights yet, trying to get a scouting report. Remember KJ Jefferson very well from that game in the swamp with Arkansas. What impact will adding a player of KJ Jefferson's caliber have on this team? Again, assuming he's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, it's immense. If he stays healthy, which is less of an if than with John Rice Plumlee, I can't stress enough, he makes more disciplined decisions. I asked him on the first presser when he arrived what his philosophy is on running the ball and taking hits and delivering punishment as a quarterback. And he embraced that delivering punishment part. He even said at one point, listen, if somebody knocks me over or takes me down that shouldn't, my mom makes me hear about it. She'll call me up and ask me what's up. It was crazy. I'm like, but he also said, I want to do it responsibly as well. I want to stay on the field. And listen, there is a short on the Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel, bing, of Coach Gus Malzahn talking about if he keeps running the ball like that, meaning John Rice Plumlee, I'll tackle him myself just so he doesn't get hurt. Okay. So what a juxtaposition just right there. And then look at what Darren Hinshaw did for John Rice Plumlee's throwing motion from his first year starting at UCF to his second. The amount of touch that Darren Hinshaw applied, an improvement he put on a guy who was supposed to be a bum, air quotes, right? Throwing the ball. Looked the difference from 1 to 2. for year 1 to year 2 was immense. Imagine what he could do with the guy who is experienced as KJ Jefferson, where really you're just, kind of applying a wrench to a couple loose connections here. And as far as maintaining identity, much like Plumlee, KJ Jefferson in his own right, despite his experience, is humble. Phil, I asked this guy about his Madden rating, and he has said, you tell me another college athlete that said, it was higher than I thought it'd be. That's not about their Madden rating. They don't do that.
So, well, this is the first year that the college guys get to have a Madden rating. So, or it's a college football rating.
Fair. Just tell me anybody else in the nation right now that's done that. It's not a thing.
Yeah, certainly not in college football where KJ did it, but you could jump around schools and find the exact right situation for you. You kind of hinted on it. It might be because I put it in my rundown here on the YouTube page, but UCF maintaining its identity. We talked a little bit about this with their run game. This is, as much as we want to talk about what KJ Jefferson can bring, this is a running football team. RJ Harvey is one of the best running backs in the country. A lot of people believe UCF has one of the best running back rooms in the country. They were top 10 in the nation, not just the Big 12, top 10 in the nation in rushing yards per game. We know this team likes to play fast. The remnants of Scott Frost of playing this hyper speed is still there. But, you mentioned it earlier, you're playing fast. That also means you have the ball a lot less. It means your defense is on the field a lot more. How has UCF had to adjust this identity to meet the greater demands? And, I don't think it's insulting to say this. The Big 12 is a lot better than the American. I've made this point to a lot of people last year, and this is not to throw shade at John Rice Plumlee.
Right.
I felt like a lot of the mistakes John Rice Plumlee was able to get away with in the American, they got pounced on. Every time he made that mistake in the Big 12, they pounced on him and they made him pay for it. How is UCF trying to maintain this identity that built the program to put the program into this position while still stepping up their play to the increased level of competition?
Right. Well, and my first question would be, what part of the identity was different, with John Rice Plumlee around? And you mentioned him, if he made certain mistakes, it would be exposed more with the Big 12. Let's also cite, but John Rice Plumlee had arguably his best games. Maybe the stats didn't show it, but the film did, against Oklahoma and possibly Texas A&M. Both games they almost and arguably should have won, right? Especially with Oklahoma, the trick play and all that. Yeah, all that. You alluded to it. I'm just backing you on that. But to bring it full circle here, we keep talking about the identity. I think the piece that's missing isn't on the offense. As a matter of fact, it's accented more now than ever, right? Who's the best Knights quarterback in history? Dante Culpepper. Who has a similar build to Dante Culpepper? We could cite Cam Newton all we want. The correct answer is KJ Jefferson looks like Dante Culpepper. Okay? That's what we're talking about with UCF history. And I think the identity that really needs to be found is they've made a living being aggressive on defense throughout history. Look at this 2017 team, the 2018 team. They weren't necessarily great on defense from a stat standpoint, but when they needed a turnover, somehow they got it. And this group hasn't done that. They couldn't even stop the run, as we've cited. Getting bigger bodies that can make one-on-one tackles and transitioning to a defensive end strategy that's more fast to get to the outside or meant to run and create pressure to roll a quarterback into the defensive tackles, whatever. Less brawn, more speed is going to be a fascinating thing to do, because listen, the certainty that you have in life is death, taxes, and the over in the Big 12. So if you can play, you don't have to be Utah good, but just so long as you can play defense somewhat, you're a threat in the Big 12.
Yeah, and look, we'll get into maybe some predictions here in a little bit, but let's not UCF. Yes, they didn't maybe have the season they wanted to have last year, but they're no pushovers. Like, they're going to be competitive. They're going to be competitive in the conference. I was at media day and talked to a lot of the players and asked them, like, what was the biggest lesson you took from that first year in the Big 12? And a lot of them said, we all understood our skill players are as good as any of the skill players in the conference, and skill players, guys that touch the ball. Sorry to our linemen.
I'm about to say that's a slur. Check out
it is a slur. It is a slur.
Aaron's Evans original. Tell you. I also talked to Creed Humphrey about that in Phoenix before the Super Bowl he won with Patrick Mahomes. We prefer to be called Big Skill, just so we're clear.
Big skill. I like it. So the little skill players are very clearly at the level that they needed to be competitive. And look, that's again how UCF has kind of built their culture, their identity, their reputation around the nation is with that. I want to tie a little bit back to the Magic here a little bit because Orlando is a team that is also looking to step itself up to a higher level of competition. They are a team that made the playoffs last year for the first time. They want to be a team that wins a playoff series, that competes for the conference finals. And obviously it's different, but for where UCF is, what do they have to do to step up into that next level, however you want to define it?
What a great analogy, Phil, by the way. Like the Magic being these misfits, one of the younger established teams in the league, now trying to reach the level that's held by one of the, I believe this is a founding organization with the Boston Celtics, guys with storied history that goes before even you or I were born. And in my case, that's amazing because I'm way older than you. But
not that much older.
Fair enough. But like that's just the analogy there is wonderful. In that the Magic as a franchise do kind of represent the Big 12 in the whole, that they're this misfit team that doesn't get appreciated. People are already talking about the next Olympic team for the U.S., by the way, and not bringing up Paolo Banchero's name. You're doing it wrong if you're not. Just throwing that out there. Okay.
Listen to previous episode of Locked On Magic for more on that.
I mean, listen, I'm inspired by somebody, but the punchline's this, Phil Ross. The where I'm getting to is where this analogy is that perfect is now you got a lot more traditional powers in the game thanks to the flux that is brought in Arizona, a Utah, a Colorado into the thing, right? I don't know that you know who Cordell Stewart was, but that
I know. Okay. NFL Blitzman, that was my quarterback.
Hey, smart. I stuck with my Niners, Steve Young, but the punchline's this, man. Like to have the opportunity for Colorado to come into the building and have the hype behind them that they do as a traditional power because of an untraditional coach in Deion Sanders, and do it in the nation and potentially beat a guy that might be the number one overall quarterback draft pick in Shedeur Sanders would be absolutely huge. And then to follow it up by going and beating an SEC team up in Gainesville with a very vulnerable, no disrespect to my Gators people out there. Shouts to former Gators Wire guy Zach Goodall is now covering the Jags, by the way. No disrespect at all. I love Billy Napier. I just think he's got dealt a hard hand, but that's one of their air quotes less tough games, is trying to hold the swamp down against UCF. We saw how that worked at the Gus Perilla when they played in that bowl, Gus's first bowl game with UCF. You saw what I did there, Phil.
I saw what you did there.
Those who aren't watching on the video feed, do it. He laughed. I saw it. But listen, there's a lot there for UCF to have the opportunity to prove themselves on big stage. And then maybe Black Friday's game against Utah, another the next closest thing to a misfit power that got where they needed to by being just a very feisty team in general and then dominating the Pac-12 later, right? It's if they getting to Black Friday and having the opportunity maybe to position themselves for a Big 12 championship berth is absolutely on the table as one of the best case scenarios for this team this year. And maybe even KJ Jefferson flying to New York for a Heisman candidacy. Not saying it'll happen, but you can't take it off the board with this team.
Look, and UCF is already, like I saw The Athletic did the article this week saying UCF is one of the unranked teams to keep an eye on for a playoff berth. Like you're in, like being in the Big 12 means you are in the game, especially in the 12-team playoff era that we're entering into now, where the gates are a little bit more open than they were before. I want to get back to that point about getting noticed, because I know that's something Magic fans care very much about and how big those kinds of games are. I want to get into that, plus get your outlook and predictions for the season coming up here in just a moment. Back here with Kyle Nash of Black and Gold Banneret, finishing up here our Locked Off Magic, talking about UCF football. You mentioned something in that previous answer that I know is something I think about, and I know a lot of Magic fans think about, and that is what national attention brings to the team and to a program like UCF's, and how those games do feel a little bigger. UCF has, at least three, I would say, like super high profile games this year. The game in the Swamp against the Gators that you mentioned, Colorado coming to the Bounce House to play, and then that Black Friday game against Utah. I know Magic fans are very, very touchy about this because I don't know if I'll be releasing this before the NBA schedule comes out on Thursday, but Orlando Magic fans get very, very obsessed about how many national television games they get because they get so few. The few that they get feel very, very big.
Mm-hmm.
Are those games, Florida, Colorado, Utah, are those games, how important are those games for UCF? And certainly in a sport like college football where perception matters because it's polls, it's not straight up competition, it's not always just the standings. How important are those three games sitting here entering the season for them?
Oh, yeah, no, they're absolutely epic. And let me be clear, UCF has this advantage on the Magic. At least UCF has the advantage of being notorious because of, and I'm going to air quote this because it's not an accurate statement, fake national championship they allegedly declared in 2017.
First off, it is not fake because the NCAA recognizes it, and we here at Locked On Magic officially recognize that national championship too because they went undefeated. The NCAA recognizes that title. It's on the stadium. They can't take it down. Let me make this point.
Please.
Alabama recognizes national championships that no one else recognizes. This is the UCF is a national championship that's more real than a couple of Alabamas that they recognize. I just want to point that out. And also, Northwestern needs to recognize their 1931 NCAA basketball national championship, but that's a art story for another day.
I love the Northwestern drop, by the way. I did not have that on the bingo card today, but listen, and there's a lot of there with that. The short version I will give is the fact that we're still talking about it, Phil, 7 bleeding years later is the advantage I'm talking about. At least they're in the lexicon. The Magic get so disrespected that even as a top 4 seed candidate, they get basically ignored and openly dissed by the Colin Cowherds. Now granted, Colin Cowherd has ignored UCF for years, and they too have these same things in common. Even though UCF has already beaten Auburn and people still refuse to acknowledge it, whole other question. The Magic need to win a series against Boston to be credible in the national media, and I mean a postseason series, by the way. You're going to keep getting dissed, folks. That's just my opinion. Take what you will.
You need, like from the Magic perspective, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
You need, winning, the Magic won 47 games last year. They were the 5 seed, but nobody knew who they were. The playoffs were the introduction for the Magic to the national audience, and they got the noon game on Saturday for game 1. They were on NBA TV for games 2, 3, and 4, or 2, 4, and 5. They, were at another afternoon game for game 4. The only game they were really in the spotlight was game 7, and that was Paolo Banchero's coming out party.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Magic only had the one national TV appearance against the Oklahoma City Thunder in the middle of the season. And that was a real exciting game. Everyone was really into it. Oklahoma City was the better team that night. They deserved to win.
Right.
The Magic win that game. All of a sudden, maybe some of the conversations change. Yes, the Magic beat the Celtics in a humongous game on Black Friday last year in the in-season tournament, the NBA Cup now. It was on NBA TV. Nobody really noticed it. Nobody really saw it. I'm going to tell you this right now. Again, I'm recording this on Tuesday after the NBA Cup schedule dropped. The most important game on the Magic schedule is December 2nd in New York, in Madison Square Garden, on TNT, the final game for the Magic, at least, in the NBA Cup. That could be the potential to clinch them into the knockout round if everything goes the way the Magic hope. But even if it's not, winning that kind of a game in that kind of environment against that kind of opponent on that kind of stage changes perceptions about you. And again, to your point about UCF being in the American, they were undefeated, but everyone said, oh, they were undefeated in the American. Oh, the Peach Bowl was a huge, huge event. Auburn was playing without some key guys. They beat them. They deserved to beat them. They got all the accolades they deserved from it. Being able to play Colorado in your building in a conference game that they have no excuses for, being able to play Utah on Black Friday, prime time on Fox, being able to play Florida in Gainesville in prime time, probably the ABC game that weekend. I would venture to guess that game will be either ESPN single or ABC prime time game of the week. That game could get game day. If Florida is able to stay undefeated, if UCF's undefeated when they meet up in October, I don't know who else is playing. That weekend might be the same weekend as Ohio State, Oregon, so I may take that back. But that is a major game. You change perceptions, as fair or unfair. You change perceptions by winning big games on big stages, and that's why UCF is in the Big 12 now, is they were seeking out that stage.
And that's a lot of the battle, but the punchline I'll land here, since you did the rest of it very nicely, is we're also catering to a poll. And you need those big moments to land a playoff game. And trust me, I have spoken ad nauseum on the Student of the Game podcast. Bing! These stupid decisions and awful rankings that have taken place at the hands of this committee on the strength of blue blood bias, and even in the particular, the ACC being one of the most most overrated conference in existence now, because the Pac-12 in its final year was at least a good conference then. Okay, the American, back when UCF was still in it, was as good, if not better, than the ACC. Top to bottom. Sure, they may have one top guy. Trevor Lawrence for a Clemson program may have been great, but they weren't on the whole. So UCF has to impress in specifics the committee on those two national games, and then to take it home on Black Friday like they did with USF back when in 2017.
And you're right. That is obviously the big difference. I
forgot to mention that's without even considering they have to win the conference championship as well.
Yeah. That little thing. Right. But to your point, that is the difference between the NBA and college football. Is like the Magic lose that game to the Knicks. Yeah, we'll all be disappointed for a little bit, but guess what? There's another game a day later, 2 days later, that you got to play. And at the end of the day, you still get your shot at the playoffs because of your record. The Magic didn't get docked from the 5 seed to the 6 seed because they were only on national TV once all season long. I will say this to everyone, like once the season starts, I don't care about the national TV games. Do your work. The national TV games will take care of itself if you do your work. UCF obviously doesn't have that luxury because of the way that sport is structured.
Right.
So let's close it out this way. Last year, UCF went 6-7. No one was particularly happy with that record. They were 3-6 in conference play, I think.
I forget that off the top of my head.
They weren't good in conference play.
Yeah, and had at least 3 games that they should have won in conference, though, right?
They were in every game but the Kansas game.
Correct.
And like we're talking about major moments. They shut down Ollie Gordon. That was an incredible defensive game from them
against a 15th ranked and a conference Oklahoma State team.
Yeah.
With the most beautiful mullet in the nation.
Oh yes. Yeah. That he is a man. He is 40. What are the expectations for UCF this season? Like what is a successful UCF season this year?
I mean, in my mind, listen, and I said what I said last year. I thought 6 games would be success because I thought the transition would be that difficult. If you told me they had the opportunity to win 8, I would be surprised. And some would even say 9 or 10, depending on how things go. I also would maintain that this year, upping the expectation a bit is good because I think there's some teams full of themselves. TCU, I'm not buying. Colorado, sorry, Dion. I don't trust your ability to.
That's a 4-win team last year.
Yeah, well, I don't trust his ability to recruit beef. You know, this is an NFL corner who didn't tackle anybody and still got to be in the Hall of Fame as an amazing player. And I'm not saying that as a slight, but what do I expect him to know about beef? Not a whole lot. So if he recruits that and fix that, more than happy to be proven wrong, and his son will thank him for it. But, you know, you got a Florida team that's got a tough schedule that may not be as good. There's some winnable games in there that are going to be those major pieces, right? I don't see them being Utah. They're just really good at the stuff that UCF isn't as good at. Bottom line. For me to ask for UCF to win 8 games is reasonable. If they take out Arizona and get 9, that's enough to sneak into a runner-up spot in the Big 12 conference. That's how competitive and unknown it is right now. It's so up in the air. There's a lot of sneaky good quarterbacks. There's a lot of quarterbacks who are good and promising that aren't going to be asked to do a whole lot because their supporting cast is really good. Please consider KJ Jefferson, by the way, in that conversation along with Kansas State's Avery Johnson, right? So a lot of it, there's just so much competition here in this conference. It's going to be a fun one to watch. It's not going to be obviously Georgia or obviously Michigan or Ohio State like the Big Ten will be, whatever. You just have no idea right now who's going to win the Big 12, and UCF is going to be that dark horse to do it. 8 or 9 wins. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that's a fair prediction. I mean, it's the Big 12 is going to be really zany this year. If you're a college football fan and you just watch college football for the chaos, turn a Big 12 game on. It's going like the Big 12's zany as it is with their play style. The conference top to bottom is going to be zany. It's not just that there's 4 new members. UCF has to play all 4 of them. Arizona State, Arizona, Colorado, and Utah.
First trip to Arizona State since the 90s, by the way.
Yeah. It's going to be a wild season for the Big 12. It's going to be a wild season for UCF. I think they're going to be a really exciting team. They're exciting regardless of their play. But they're a quality team that should be competitive as well. Kyle, if any of my listeners want to get more of your UCF thoughts, where can they find your work?
Well, first of all, I reserve the right to change my prediction with as it would be released on the review I do with the Night Shift podcast that's powered by the Black and Gold Banneret. Also, check out my work for now with Jaguars on SI covering the Jacksonville Jaguars, as well as the Duval Dive podcast that airs on 11 a.m. on Friday. By the way, Tuesday is the drop for the Night Shift podcast, as well as the Student of the Game podcast, 9 o'clock Eastern. And this week we're actually doing the AFC East preview. So those of you cats out there that are into the Dolphins, Bills, Patriots, who's into the Patriots right now? Is that even a thing? And as well as the Jets, make sure you check into that in general for the Student of the Game podcast. But Phil, thank you for having me aboard. Until next time, my friend. Class dismissed.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Kyle, for jumping on and joining us here as we went locked off Magic, talking about UCF football. We'll definitely try to check in later on in the year. Kyle, thanks so much for joining. I want to first thank Kyle for jumping on the show, entertaining me a little bit, entertaining my questions that about UCF football, but trying to tie in some Magic themes as well. I hope you got something out of the conversation and out of this. We're trying to fill some time here, so I apologize a little bit, but let's go a little off topic here. It's that time of the year to go a little bit locked off Magic. You of course find Kyle and his work where he said over at Black and Gold Banneret, probably the best source for the best UCF blog out there. I know the guys at Black and Gold Banneret, they do a fantastic job covering the UCF Knights. We're only 2 weeks away from kickoff. I'll be at the Bounce House for that New Hampshire game opening day, and I'll be covering UCF throughout the season for the Associated Press as well. So going to be a lot of fun. Help me out. Help me get ready for coverage as well. You can, of course, find me on Twitter at @PhilipR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast and Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all the fun places on podcast to your podcast-enabled listening device. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, you can, of course, find us there on Twitter at @OMagicDaily. And for even more Orlando Magic content, be sure to check out my Patreon page, the Orlando Magic Hub, at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. And as always, thank you for your support. I'll be posting my initial thoughts on the NBA, on the Magic schedule to my Patreon page. That will be exclusive to my subscribers. So if you want my initial thoughts on the schedule, that will be the place to go. Don't forget, we'll also be doing a live show at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, August 15th. That is today, as you're probably listening to this. It's Thursday if you're not. Thursday, August 15th, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll do a live reaction show to the Orlando Magic schedule. Should be a good time. Bring your questions. I'll answer everything about the team this upcoming season, probably go for about an hour or so. That'll answer all your questions, schedule or not. I'll break down the trouble parts I see in the schedule, where kind of the horse race part of the schedule as well that I usually do when the schedule comes out. So we'll get to all that on tomorrow's live episode of Locked On Magic. That'll be available for you and everyone to listen to as well. And of course, available on audio shortly after we're done going live. I have to edit and can press it down and do all that stuff. But that's good to do it for me. Be sure to check out Locked On NBA for your next listen where the season never ends, providing national expertise and with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NBA in the description below, so you don't need to search. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's good to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked Off Magic. Until tomorrow for our scheduled release episode, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.